Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today our guest is Spencer Hilligoss. Thanks for being on the show again, Spencer.
Whitney, oh man, you brought me back. Thank you so much. It's an honor to come back and chat with you again.
Glad to have you back, Spencer. It's been great to see your success and progression, just since we've met. And just so the listeners know, Spencer was a guest on show 357. I'd encourage you to go back and listen to him there. He told a lot more of his story there. I know we're going to cover it some today because it's a great story, and I know many of you will benefit from listening to how he got into this business and what he's been able to accomplish. But just in case you haven't heard that yet, I want to tell you a little more about him. He's a passive investor, co-sponsor, and former technology leader. His company, Madison Investing, has co-sponsored deals totaling more than 5,000 units for more than $600 million worth. Spencer invests in syndications as an LP and actively leads Madison Investing along with his co-founder and wife, Jennifer. So as a technology leader, Spencer built a 13-year track record of growing high-performance teams across 5 companies, 3 of them unicorns, valued at more than $1 billion. In November of 2019, Spencer retired from his lucrative technology career, leaving behind the $4 billion loan origination teams he built at Lending Home, funding 600 fixed flips transactions per month. Now, he is focused on spending time with loved ones and growing Madison Investing by helping passive investors achieve their goals. Spencer, it's an amazing story just reading your bio. I mean, I've read it a few times, but it's incredible. I mean, what you've been able to accomplish, but I know that's a big step in leaving a career or like that. I know you worked really hard at it, and just to get there, is not a small feat. So I'm looking forward to getting into that a little bit today. But give us a little more, update us again just on your bio, your background, just getting into this business a little bit. Because I know the listeners are going to gain from that.
Yeah, and Whitney, thank you so much for bringing me back. I think that you and I have gotten to know each other over the years now. It's becoming years now. And I think it's a time to educate for so many folks out there. And so podcasts are part of how I do that. And you are a huge influence on the education sphere out there in real estate. So thank you for everything that you're doing. So for me, I am based out here in the Bay Area, California, and which is NorCal, if you want to call it the cool way. So I'm in Alameda. It's tucked right between Oakland and San Francisco. So you already mentioned this briefly, Whitney, but just as a rehash for folks that might be hearing this for the first time, I have spent the last 13 years of my career in my life building really high velocity teams and operations and sales groups for tech companies. That's the local business out here in the Bay Area. And so I didn't really start that way. I used to hide this story, but it's really brief. I actually grew up in a real estate household. So my dad was actually one of the top performing residential real estate brokers in the United States back in the 90s. And I got exposure to it then. I kind of soaked up all those learnings. I didn't really realize I was getting those learnings until later in life, obviously. A lot of them are coming out even now at the ripe old age of 36. But I will just bring that up because I watched an active business getting built. I was literally sitting on plots of land at the age of 6, watching him do what he does. I was working open houses as a teenager for multi-million-dollar mansions, and I just didn't really like it. Frankly, I ran away from it into tech. And so I watched my dad build that business up. And later, when we went through a really hard time as a family, I watched my brother pass away to cancer. I watched, my parents get divorced as a result of that, as it usually happens, and a bunch of really just challenging stuff during this thing we called the dark decade in our family. And I watched his active income go away. I watched our entire family's, financial livelihoods kind of shrink significantly. And so I took a lot of observation, a lot of learnings from those experiences. And now I have kids of my own, right? I have 2 young boys, and my wife, Jennifer, and I, I've balanced our careers with raising them over the last few years in particular. And I found my way into a real estate tech company, which was the 5th software company in my career. And I wasn't planning on, some master plan of becoming a real estate investor. I was in back office software for small businesses, like the driest stuff ever. And I mean, Whitney, that's not usually what people want to think and talk about in the morning, is like accountancy and payroll software and HR software for small businesses. But I'm so thankful I got nudged by a mentor to go join Lending Home, which is now the biggest fix and flip single family lender in the country. And the last time you and I talked, I think I was actually in the office because I was still working full time there. So just around 5 months ago from right now, I put in my resignation and I left behind that entire career I had been working so hard for so long to build. And the reason I did it was because we've been just grinding and focused and working hard and investing passively. And now we are active investors to the point where we had the resilience, the financial resilience built in to go full time. So I'm now a full-time real estate investor. And we still invest passively, but we also now co-sponsor and help other people invest passively in these commercial syndications, multifamily, self-storage, mobile home parks. Those are our three asset classes that we tend to focus on. So that is the passion and the joy that I get to experience daily right now. I still work hard, but it's the work on my terms, and it's the kind of stuff we've been able to do because of passive investing, and I'm so grateful for all of that.
Wow. So that's an incredible story, Spencer, and grateful to, like I said, to know you and to see your success over the last few years. And, so I know there's many listeners that can gain value from your experience and a little bit about why, you're getting into real estate while you had this maybe great tech job or, this career that you had been focused on, why bring in real estate at the same time?
Yeah. So I was working at this company, right? This Lending Home company. And by the time I got there, we're talking around early 2016, I had observed not only my own bank accounts and my own 401k accounts that I had been dumping money into. We're thankful that Jennifer and I had done well enough to get some excess income from our W-2 jobs, right? So we were following a traditional path, like so many corporate, folks out there do. We dump money in. If you have excess every month, you put it in the 401k, you tuck it away until the end of your career. Now, there's a different path that a lot of Silicon Valley folks, tech folks, follow in particular. What they do is they chase these smaller stage companies, oftentimes they're VC funded, venture capital funded, and they're looking for companies that have the next Facebook characteristics or the next Google characteristics. They want to find that early stage company they can join and then ride the quote unquote rocket ship until they have a huge IPO or like a huge exit. Maybe they get acquired by a big company. And then that early stage equity becomes a 7-digit number, a huge liquidity moment, if you want to call it that. And so suddenly I was sitting there in 2016 realizing I was betting my future the same way I would say the majority of early stage tech employees do. I was betting my financial future on this mythical moment, that frankly doesn't happen that much. It doesn't happen often where people can actually join the right company, win the tech lottery, if you want to call it that, and somehow absolve all of their financial sins with one huge, awesome fell swoop because they happen to pick the right company, happen to pick the right time, happen to pick the right job, and get a meaningful amount of equity. So that was our plan. And once I got to 2016, I had just experienced the hardest startup run or role that I had ever gone through. I was working, this is pre-Lending Home, I was working 16 hours a day. And I was doing that for about a year and a half. It was a really hot startup. It was really high potential. They might even have a really amazing exit. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for that, but I'm not going to expect it. I had a really strained moment with Jennifer and I. We're sitting there going, we have an infant son. I'm away from being able to focus on him and her. Something has to give. I can't go do this for the next 30 years. Like, what happens if I get hit by a bus? What happens if I lose my ability to produce income at the levels that I'm currently doing it? Our whole lifestyle is tied up into a certain amount of income currently. And we saw that. We realized, man, we have to do something. I have to do something about this. That was the spark. And the spark that lit that fuse, Whitney, was, okay, I need to figure out how to ensure that I play financial offense in a way that, my dad never quite really did. He had to keep working Robert Kiyosaki, in that famous book that we all know and we all reference all the time, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he would use the example of the buckets and the pipelines. Active jobs like brokers, wholesalers, flippers, those are the buckets, the figurative buckets. Same thing with the W-2 job. You go in, you make money, and if you stop going in, you stop making money. The pipeline's quite different. Pipelines mean they keep flowing regardless of if you're working or not. I had only buckets. We wanted more pipelines. And so I went deep down the rabbit hole of researching passive investment. We bought a few rentals. We had to go through those stages like everybody else does. We bought a local duplex, paid too much for it. We bought some turnkeys in the Midwest. We still have them now. And then we found out if you buy single family homes and one person leaves, well, then you're at 0% occupancy overnight. Didn't like that. And then eventually we found multifamily, and we eventually found syndication investing in general. And so now that's what we do. We invest our capital passively. And we started that a few years ago, initially thinking rentals were passive. I'm not going to be the guy to get on here though, Whitney, and say rental investing is bad. That's not the message. The message is that was not the strategy for us, because we eventually want to be completely passive. We want to be able to travel the world with our children when they're grown a little bit more, not at the ripe old age of 6 and 2. That would be a handful outside the COVID context. But that's the kind of stuff that we're going for. I realized I'm not playing financial offense and I'm not playing financial defense. That's the ethos that underpins everything that we do. And this is a guiding light for how we want to make financial decisions and invest moving forward.
Awesome. Well, I want to fast forward just a little bit, and because I want to be able to ask you a little bit about your business now, and because I know listeners are also wanting to be where you're at, but specifically about just like the goals that you set or the goals you decided on, and how listeners should think about just goal setting towards their own financial freedom. Like you did. Can you give them any advice on that?
Sure. Yeah. There was a light bulb moment for me, Whitney. I wish someone had helped me wrap my head around this point earlier. So many of us, myself included, were conditioned to break a pie chart out when it came to our portfolios, right? It's still useful. You think of that when you go and choose your 401k option, maybe you look at a target date fund. It says this percentage should be allocated towards stocks. This percentage should be allocated to our alternative assets or bonds. That never really resonated with me. I didn't understand how it fit for my life until I was retired. And for me, thankfully, I'm grateful that I still have a few years, hopefully. I can make it all the way to that traditional retirement age. The big learning was a monthly cash flow number brings everything else into clear line of sight. And so once we started goal setting based on that just simply means, what is the number that if we have coming in that will cover all of our expenses or to live well as being able to probably have a little bit of extra to continue investing passively. Once we set that goal, every decision that we would make, it changed. It informed everything, Whitney. All the way down to about 2 years ago, as an example, we wanted to buy a new car. We don't have any new cars right now, by the way. We're driving used across the board. And so silly, small example, but let's take the silliness away from it. We were about to go buy a 0% down SUV that I really wanted. And then we looked at the fact it was going to cost us $800 a month just to get that financing option. That would have taken cash away from us every month. So I just brought up that one silly example because I think people, they undervalue the power of picking a cash flow number as their monthly target. And if you're working a job full time and you're struggling with getting motivated and you're struggling with making smart decisions about this stuff, put that number down on paper. Figure out what is your monthly number. And particularly if you're in a relationship, if you're married, if you have a significant other, if you're living with them, you're figuring out the money discussions, have that together. And it ain't going to be easy. I mean, Jennifer and I had a couple weekends that were involved. I mean, not to go TMI, but it involved tears and smiles and cries. And the whole cycle ran itself multiple times. And then we got to a point of clarity that we had never achieved prior. So I really do think the goal setting on that front is absolutely critical for folks to start there before they jump straight into, let's go buy a duplex, let's go buy a rental, let's go drop $50,000 to $100,000 into a syndication. You got to make sure that it actually applies to your specific strategy.
I appreciate you bringing up just like having that conversation with your spouse as well. I mean, it's so important, right? It's like just thinking through those goals with your spouse. I know my wife will bring up things. She's not big into real estate, but she's just smart about things, and she'll bring things, she'll talk about things, bring up different things. I'm like, well, I hadn't even thought about that, And so, yeah, I mean, she's definitely such an asset to our business, she's my best business partner for sure. So important. I'm glad you brought that up. But what about, so then you're setting your goals, you're pushing towards that, obviously you're working so many hours. So why did you quit your W-2 when you did? How did you, I know maybe you talked about it a little bit, but maybe elaborate on like that decision, that moment when it's like, okay, we're going to do this. When, how did you know when that was?
Yeah, man, no matter which way you slice it, Whitney, I want to make it clear to folks, it never became an easy decision, and I thought back to a piece of advice I heard from a mentor, a real estate mentor. I've been working with him for a few years now. And I think that he didn't have a regret around this per se, but he said if you could go back in time to when he quit his successful W-2 career and went full-time as an investor, he said, don't pull the ripcord, or don't just go cold turkey. What you should do, Spence, is if he could go back in time, he would phase the whole process. He would wind up and build up his passive income, his real estate provided income from all sources. And he would do that over a duration, right? Over a period of probably years. And so we followed that playbook, and we didn't want to just, frankly, it'd be a selfish move. It would be really fun to just say 2 years ago, okay, I'm all in. Like at the time I was devouring books and I was devouring podcasts, and I was just drinking that Kool-Aid so much that I would have just leapt off the cliff and gone all in, but it probably would have hurt. We would have had to significantly reduce our household spending to make that work at that time. Instead, we waited, and I just kept going to work, kept doing a really good job to the best of my ability at my day job. But I also was making some very specific decisions at my day job to enable me to continue building up our business, that is Madison Investing, building up the resilience financially on a personal level to leap and push really hard on building our business. And so I said no, as an example, to 3 different promotions because I wanted to cap my hours, because I wanted to make sure I had ample time to research these investment opportunities for real estate, to make sure I could go vet sponsors, to go and build the right relationships with people on nights and weekends. So these are all the things that I realized. And 4 or 5 months ago, when I finally said, like, this is the time, right? This is the time to retire, quote unquote. It came down to a moment of, we have replaced most of my income from my W-2 career, which was good. I worked hard to get to that point, but we replaced most of my income. Jennifer does still work full time in her leadership career, separate, totally different hat that she wears. But we had enough, and we felt this is the time. Now it would be silly not to do this at this moment. So we did it. I didn't know it was going to happen 5 months before the COVID-19 crisis and, and the pandemic circles the globe and the economy comes to a screeching halt. But I got to tell you, like, the resilience that we built up, and the resilience and the mindset and finances that we built up to get to that moment, Whitney, created basically a moat around our family and our business, which meant whenever someone walks up to me now, well, I guess it's virtually goes into a Zoom call with me now because I don't see him too much face to face at the moment, but they'll ask me, oh my God, are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? Because man, didn't you quit your tech career 5 months before all this? How are you guys okay? And I'm like, well, I hate to flip the script on you. We're not just doing okay. We're kind of thriving,
They're still in that week to week mindset, right?
Yeah.
They're not thinking passively.
Yeah. And it's never intended to be braggadocious. It's intended just to say, you can be here too, friend. Right. You can, and I really truly believe that. I think anyone can do this. And it just comes down to an open-mindedness. And sometimes to really get someone's attention that you care about, to make sure that they can start making just better decisions about where they place their money and where they put their time and their education financially. I want to kind of snap them out of it and be like, you can go into even something as awful and crushing as this pandemic has been on the economy. you can feel financially okay if you start thinking and planning in 10-year increments, and you make big moves and you start investing with people that actually are there with your vested interest in mind. That's why we started Madison Investing, is because we felt like, wait, we can do this. Yes, it's a for-profit business, clearly, but it's also something where we can do good and do well at the same time and feel like our friends and our colleagues and our network are coming along with us.
So, Spencer, I know a lot of the listeners are, they're thinking, how did he get all that done? He's working full time, or maybe they're working full time thinking, I don't know how where am I going to find the time to do all that, to get a business started. And I mean, I've been there myself a long time. But for you, how did you find the time just to research deals that you're going to invest in? And I mean, obviously you had a family, and maybe when you started, I think your first son was born, at that time, I think, but, finding time to still be the father, the husband, you're still working full time, but then starting this career, how did you find the time?
Yeah, I'm going to use a very nerdy sounding term. I can't remember which leader I got this from within my corporate career, but the term limiting factors. There's 3 of them, and I won't go too far down this, but it's a helpful construct for goal setting. And I use it regularly: time, capital, expertise. So those are the 3 limiting factors. All of us are subject to them, but we all have different starting points depending on where we're at, right? So I looked at my calendar. It sounds so simple and nerdy and tactical, Whitney. I audited my calendar. That was the first thing that I did when I was starting to set these goals. And so this is a few years ago now. I was working full time, just starting that early process. I didn't even know I wanted to necessarily go head first into building a high growth business and helping other investors get into passive investing. But I knew that I needed time to go and research deals. I knew that I needed time to go vet sponsors. So I audited my calendar. I put away my Xbox. That was a very sad day. But I also stopped, I really couldn't go to just fun social dinners as often. I had to sacrifice, and this is stuff in the big picture. It's not that big of a sacrifice, particularly compared to all of the hardship going on in the world right now. But that's where I had to start. I had to start auditing my calendar and saying no to people. And that the ability to do that comes from goals, all the way back to that monthly number, right? That monthly cash flow number that Jennifer and I had set informed big decisions around, let's go focus on multifamily, self-storage, and mobile home parks. That's a big decision. Small decisions on, do I say yes to that lunch with that person that I care about, but I have a really critical deadline that I have to hit this week? Like that's a relatively small decision in a vacuum. But what if I make that decision wrong 20 times in a row over the course of 3 months? Well, now we're talking about a lot of hours. So that's the kind of stuff, to find the time on those 3 limiting factors, that people just need to wrap their heads around. You have more time than you realize, guys. I promise you, you have more time. So the other 2, just really briefly, would be expertise. Expertise, I decided to go active in real estate. Leading up to this, I read 24 books, not exaggerating, 24 books, over 400 podcasts devoured. And that's probably undercounting. That is not something you necessarily need to do to be an effective passive investor. Then it wouldn't be passive, right? So what you do need to do is, if you don't have baseline expertise, partner with people who have it, and then they can help you do what you need to do. That is a primary value why people end up working with us at Madison Investing on one of their first or second syndication investments. So that's the kind of stuff you do on expertise, is you could borrow that expertise if you need to. And I don't claim to have all the answers. Like I'm not an in-depth asset management operator. That's why I bring some of these things around operations, around certain things around investor relations, around certain things around marketing. These are the things I bring to deals. So we seek out folks that can work with us on that front. And so that's the kind of stuff that folks just need to think about on their expertise. If you don't have it, if you don't have the time to go get it, partner with people, vet those people, and then they can help you in addressing that.
On that front, how do you decide which sponsors you want to work with, or deals or markets to focus on?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a contrarian view. I'm more and more, I'm starting to realize that it is, I think. I start with the who, and I place an overemphasis on the who. And so that 3-part framework that you and I are both familiar with, Whitney, around, you look at the team, the team, the market, and the deal. those are the three pillars of how do you analyze a real estate opportunity. I put a relative, very large weight on the who. And the reason for that is I've seen so many business plans in the startup world and the corporate world alike that are perfect, like a perfect spreadsheet, a perfect business model. And I've seen the wrong leader put at the helm of driving that business plan. And it goes straight into the ground and it misses the mark. And so I brought that ethos into real estate. And I was like, I get that there's great markets, there's kind of weak markets or declining markets, dying markets. There's all these differences around the where. It comes down first to the who. And so that for me is where we started. So once we made our first couple of relationships with sponsors, we started investing our own capital with different sponsors. Then we realized, well, wait a sec, we don't necessarily need quantity. We don't need to be on every sponsor's list under the sun. We just need a select few that are the right ones. And so that was the approach that we took. And when we want to go and find better deals for our investors in our own club, right? Because we have a Madison investing program, folks sign up and they can see the deals that we're putting our own money into, and then they can decide if they want to come along with us. So we start with the who, and this is contrarian. I will say, I wish it wasn't in this space, Whitney, but the things that we look at for the who are going to be the track record. And there's actual sub-bullets and a spreadsheet behind this. I have it pulled up with me right now in case anyone ever wants to go down the rabbit hole, but this is not a 2-hour podcast. I don't want to bore people. But we got track record, approach, team, communications, and the most important one, which I bring up proactively now every time if someone asks about this, is values. And it matters now more than ever. So the example would be, last thing I'll mention on this topic to your question is, does this sponsor have an established philosophy on how they approach something like tenant relations? And if they don't have an answer to that, if they don't want to take the time to think about that and answer that, probably not going to work with them. And, it sounds so simple, but like, if that doesn't matter to you, you're probably still crushing it out there as an operator, but I'm just saying now more than ever, we're in a time where tenant relations just became critically more important, even more important than it was before. So that's the kind of stuff that matters to us, Whitney. I just wanted to bring up the who matters more than the where any day of the week for us.
For sure. No doubt about it, to me as well. And so, yeah, I love you brought up the values as well. That's so important. But what's changed for you, say, pre-COVID-19 to now?
Yeah, so we actually started 6 months before COVID hit. And I had no idea it was coming. No one did, clearly. I mean, those of us in the space of real estate and economists and financiers, that they all knew, we all knew there's probably a recession coming because we were over a decade into a bull market, into a growth cycle. And if you study history, that cycle is going to end. It's just, it has to happen. Something has to give. No one out there knew that COVID-19 was going to hit. I certainly didn't. I don't know that crystal ball. If you know anyone that does, I would love to meet them. But we didn't know that. So what we had started, though, was we started deliberately shifting strategically within our business, preparing to pull a figurative lever. Like, we're going to basically pull a lever and say, you know what? If this comes, let's be ready. We're going to go and lean harder into certain asset types. And so we're only going to work with a select few partners, and we're not going to say yes to working with everybody. And we are going to be selective about who we work with and the asset types we go into. So we started saying no more often to deals. We started saying no more often to sponsors. We went harder into a couple of places that we're already fond of, and we've done deals. So we looked at things like self-storage. Multifamily has been and will continue to be a primary focus for us. But we also started looking into self-storage. We also started looking into mobile home parks. And we've done that really, sparingly over the past 3 years. But now we're going heavier into it because there's certain things that just align very well within that space, within those asset classes. So that's the kind of stuff that, gearing up for pre and post COVID, we were planning for. I don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now. I don't claim to have any answers. I will say, though, out of all the opinions that are flying around out there, Whitney, it's amazing how the doom and gloom, I'd say fortune tellers that were saying that by now, we're sitting here in June 1st, we were expecting to see like rent collections from multifamily bottom out by now. I think nationally we almost saw not only flat, but depending on A class, B class, C class, we're actually seeing it up a little bit. So it's not necessary for people to go out, I think, and be so darn doom and gloom about things. We're just taking the data as it comes in, making thoughtful business assumption decisions. And I will say this, we have done one deal to date this year. And that one deal had on paper really strong counter-cyclical, I would say, recession resilience baked into it in the numbers, like a really great break-even occupancy, meaning the thing could be half full. The apartment could literally be half full and still profitable. So those are the types of things that we look for. And I think pre and post COVID, or more like pre-recession and then mid-recession. And by the way, we're not post-COVID. We're in this thing. We're in this thing for a while, in my humble opinion. So I don't want to insinuate that we're actually done with it. There's still people out there going through hardship right now, and that's a fact. So those are some of the things that I would say have shifted for us and we're focusing on now.
Nice. So maybe highlight just a few things, and we're almost out of time, but highlight just a few things of an example of an attractive deal for you, and you can say pre-COVID or now, either one, or maybe it's always the same, but give us a few details of that attractive deal to your team.
Yeah. So a couple things on the who, I already went into this a bit, but I would just say, looking for people that have done it before, ideally in a specific market, and they've done it before. They've run that business plan and strategy before. For example, if it's their first time doing a value add, they're buying that asset, they're improving that asset, and they're doing it with a class, B class, C class multifamily property. We don't want to be their guinea pig necessarily. And so that's the kind of stuff, first and foremost, that we do look for. Now, we have gone further into places like self-storage. And so, examples would be, right now, storage is appealing to us and to me and for our capital. We have actually invested already very recently in a self-storage deal. And so I could speak to it from our own capital perspective. We put our money in because there's these Ds, these D words, which are not always rosy to talk about, but they are a need that has to get met in the middle of downturns, which is if there's unfortunately a downsizing at a company, if someone has to downsize their lifestyle, they have to store that stuff somewhere. Mm-hmm. If someone has an unfortunate death in the family, it's inevitable at some point, they have to typically have storage needs. Those are the types of things that we are looking for. And we're also looking for things that have, as we're going to this downturn, slightly higher cash on cash returns. I think as you were looking at the later stages of the growth cycle, you could see some of these projects that were banking really heavy on the back end of a project at the sale to achieve those really kind of sexy looking returns. Now heading into other asset classes at this stage of the cycle, we're seeing some pretty compelling, cash on cash. And so that's what attracted us with our own capital to projects like the ones that we just invested in, because you're able to see really solid returns. I mean, I would say even like double digits within cash on cash. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking for. We're still in some of these markets that we have been in, and we're continuing to going to be a fan of. I would say, some of them would be like we've been in Texas, we're going to still be in Texas, the Carolinas, opportunistic in Florida. I would say Idaho is up and coming and appealing. And so I think there's a handful of markets that are really attractive to us because all those quote unquote fundamentals around migration trends are actually now still playing out, by the way, Whitney. I would say we don't know yet how much of an impact COVID will ultimately have on the question when people ask, where should I live now? Because all the way down to how apartment buildings are structured, all the way that cities are laid out. These are all things that are going to be impacted for years to come, most likely within COVID. So
for sure,
we'll have to just watch and see.
What's a way you've recently improved your business that we could apply to ours?
Well, that is a really timely question. So a couple of things we materially changed, I should say, added to our vetting process. We now do a comprehensive background check on a sponsor before we invest with them for the first time. And that's not cheap. I mean, we're talking about spending, about $1,000 or something like that. Maybe it depends on the person and the level of depth, but it could be $500 to $1,000. So we're actually putting our own money into that.
Now, is that as a passive investor, or you mean as a co-sponsor?
So a two-part answer to that. So before we actually even become a co-sponsor with an active sponsor, we are now also putting our own money in first, pure, just as a LP. And so that was a deliberate step. So those are two deliberate steps that we just kind of segued into, Whitney, which is we are putting our own money in pure just as LPs before we start working with a sponsor as a co-sponsor. We're also now background checking the sponsor to make sure that they are who they say they are. And we already believe them. By that point, I've had dozens of conversations with them. This is not like at cold reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm going to go pay for a background check on you. Do you want to work with me? That would be quite creepy. And so instead, what we did was put those two processes in place more recently. And there's a couple other things that we're now doing because it is harder to get on a plane. There are really, really great services you can do to go and, do due diligence and inspections physically in person if I can't necessarily get on a plane the way that I typically do to go and look at a property firsthand myself, which is usually part of our standard process too. So those are a couple of things that we've now done because you got to get rigorous, and there's lots and lots of people doing this stuff for the first time. There's lots of sponsors that are enthusiastic, highly capable people, but they're newer in the game. And we want to make sure that their experience doesn't come with any baggage, like if there's a felony on there, we want to make sure that we know about it. We want to make sure that at least they're forthright with their histories too.
So what's your best source of meeting new investors right now?
Yeah. Referrals are now going really well for us. We have a lot of folks that are very happy and they've repeat invested with us in some cases, 6 times, 7 times over. So they are bringing in other folks. And so my network in the tech industry has been our primary source just because I worked at so many companies and I met so many folks and I hired so many folks along the way. So that has been our primary. Now, I would also say that I'm pretty active on LinkedIn every day. So I try to put out, I don't hire someone else to do this for me. I'm literally on there every day trying to stir up some motivation for folks as well as give some education for them and actually start discussions. So we're getting some LinkedIn folks that reach out to me as well. But just like you and I are discussing right now, Whitney, podcasts were huge for me as an education point when I first got into this stuff. And we do get folks that regularly reach out and not just invest, but just to connect, to look for guidance. And I'm always happy to talk with folks if they want to reach out. If they hear me rambling on here like a madman talking about the merits of investing in real estate and they want to connect, I would love to talk to them about that kind of stuff. And I'm always happy to share the stuff that's been helpful for me. So those are the things that have been most helpful, I would say.
And how do you like to give back?
Yeah, so we, on the financial front, we donate in a lot of different ways, but I would say time-wise, what I do is I don't offer a coaching program, a paid coaching program. I do spend a lot of time coaching. And so that is the way that I can give back materially, particularly with folks that I think, not just within the real estate world, but also people that I care about within the corporate world who are trying to find their way. It's not easy. Like the climbing the ladder is no longer applicable. We're not in the industrial age anymore. And so people need help and guidance on how to navigate and carve out a career for themselves. And so that's the kind of stuff that I don't ask for any fees. I don't ask for anything else like that. I just want to be helpful when I can. I can't always do it, but I try to do that regularly every single week.
Well, I'm grateful for your time, Spencer, and just your willingness to give back, not only in those ways, but just with us today on the show and sharing from just how you got into this business. I know so many of the listeners are in those shoes or trying to make that happen and figuring out it can be so overwhelming. It seems, initially, especially if you're still working full time and if you already have a family in place, and it's hard to be supportive there while trying to make these things happen. You've done it, and congratulations to you, by the way, and just grateful to know you. But tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
Yeah, well, and thank you for all the kind words, Whitney. I mean, obviously, you already know I think the world of you, and I thank you for all the education you brought to me, and as well as the rest of the listeners. So I think primary way to learn more about us and to connect with me would be just through our website. So madisoninvesting.com. You can absolutely join our LP or passive investor program. If you head there, there's a big button in the top right. You click join the list, and it just asks for some basic compliance information, and I'll set up a call with you. The other way is go on LinkedIn. I promise I will not bite. So if you reach out on LinkedIn for Spencer Hilligoss and send me a connection invite, I'm happy to accept. And it would be great just to kind of kick off a conversation from there.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.